Alright guys, so we really haven't we haven't done a video in a while. Took a little break. So this is the upper housing primered, zinc primer. We're getting most of the parts done. This is the water intake tube, the rudders, the side on the upper gear case, and then this is the big one here, the upper gear case. A lot of little things, so we got to sandblast that one. But what we did pretty much with all these was we just grinded it with a wire wheel. The paint came off just fine. Took it all the way down to bare metal, and then right now primered it. So next coat for these guys that are already primered will be finish coat, and then like I said, we gotta finish the upper gear housing. The other part that's gonna need sandblasting is the lower unit. I'm not done wire brushing it. It's quite a big piece, so I gotta do it a few times, go back up and over. But all in all the metal is good. No pitting, no rusting in any parts of it. So once we get this down to bare metal, reprime it with zinc primer and repaint it, this thing's gonna look beautiful. Alright guys, so I'm spraying the primered parts right now. This is the I guess upper, not gear housing, but the upper exhaust housing. And then we're going to do the rudders and the side ports on the upper gear housing, and then I also have to do the drive and upper gear housing, but that needs to be sandblasted. But we're just using this, typical engine paint. This is for, specific for outboards and inboards, West Marine and stuff like that. We're just rattle canning most of this. These drives get a lot of rust on them and stuff like that, so you're doing a lot of repaints and everything. So, and I don't have a setup for a sprayer or the space really. I actually just get away with getting the sandblasting done, so I can't really do much more than this, but it's enough paint job. We're going to do 2 coats of paint. We already have a good nice coat of zinc primer, as you guys can see, so 2 coats of this stuff will do just fine. Alright guys, we got all these parts sprayed. They're looking nice and beautiful. All nice and white. They won't stay all nice and beautiful, but they look nice and beautiful right now. Okay guys, here's the top cap all painted, at least primered, zinc primered. So it's 1 coat of zinc primer, and then we'll do 2 coats of paint. And for what I'm using just to buzz all this stuff, besides the sandblaster, is just this cheap porta cable grinder and a wire wheel. Alright. So now the upper gear housing is all nice and primed up, looking good. This after we buzzed it, we actually sandblasted it. We actually sandblasted it with a Harbor Freight sandblaster after we buzzed it with the grinder. But yeah, so there you go, all nice and primed, looking good. And once this cooks for about 24 hours, I will then put on the final coats of paint. Now this is the lower drive, and this is the last to get stripped, primed, and painted. This is the last part. So I saved pretty much the biggest and heaviest for last. Most of it can be done with the grinder, and then the only thing that needs to be done with the sandblaster is in between here. I can't get a grinder or anything in to strip this paint, so we're just going to sandblast that strip on both sides. So yeah, let's get to it. Alright, this is all, lower drive is all primed up. I literally just ran out in the last second, so that was perfect amount of primer. So we got everything, all the rest of the parts primed up that we haven't done. So now we just gotta let these sit and pretty much cure up a little bit, and then we can go ahead and put the final coats on. Alright guys, we just sprayed these with the Inboard Johnson Evinrude white, and we've got the upper gear case housing done. We've got the cover done here, and then this one is going to take a little bit longer. What we got to do is we got to do one side, let it dry and cure, and then we're going to have to flip it over, do the other side. So it's going to take a little bit longer on the lower drive, but that's alright. Alright guys, now we got the lower drive all painted, both sides. Yeah, it's looking good, man. Look at that. All that hard work paying off. Looking bueno. Alright guys, everything is painted up here on the boat. And so now we are going to start resealing and putting new gaskets on. I just got the last order of parts pretty much from marineengine.com. You guys can check them out. I don't know if you guys have been to them, but they pretty much have all the parts I need for this stern drive setup, so that's great. So we are going to reseal, regasket, put the ball gears back on, get the water pump back in, and put this thing all back together. Okay guys, as you know, we were having overheating problems on this boat, and I'm pretty sure I figured out everything, but I want to double check everything before I put it back together. Even in this older book, the OMC Stern Drive Shop Manual, it even states that you should put a pencil or some type of probe into this water passage hole to double check that it's clear of any debris and stuff that may cause clogs. Honestly, this engine, my uncle took very good care of it. It was flushed out after every single outing, so the water system was quite clear, and there was not much corrosion or debris in it at all. Alright, so the easy stuff first. This is the exhaust housing seal, and this is what the upper gear case sits on and swivels off of. So it's this guy. It's part number 0308596, Evan Johnson. So we're going to put this in here, and when you do these seals and stuff, make sure to grease them up a little bit. I'm using boat trailer bearing grease and stuff because it can take high temps and the type of stress that this will be taking. So soak it up in get a little grease to soak up in it. It'll just help the life of the rubber and stuff. And like I said, we're replacing pretty much everything on this so that we have all new seals and gaskets. So yeah. Okay, next is the water port covers with the gasket and everything. So those need to go back on. These are the gaskets, part 308592. There's two of them, obviously, and pull a little bit of ATV on them, cinch them down, get it nice and tight, clean it off, and then when we have this all together and back on the boat, we're going to do one more little spray down, because you can see little parts here. When I was cleaning off the gasket behind, some of it chipped. I mean, you can barely see it, but some of it chipped. So repaint and stuff once it's all on the boat, and it'll look real gleaming. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to get this all on here, try to do it nice and cleanly. What we also want to do is throw some anti-seize on these bolts. These are exposed to salt water and stuff. Corrosion happens, so little anti-seize on those will help out. And don't worry, they're not going to get loose. Tighten them down nice and snug. They'll be just fine. And also it'll be going through the gasket stuff and everything, so it's going to stick just fine. But like I said, just put some anti-seize on there. It'll help you out in the future. Okay, we've got our ATV gasket and cover on, and I've just started all the bolts in the holes. What we want to do is we want to tighten them down evenly. So we're going to, like say, tighten down this, bring down this one a little bit, bring down this one, bring down this one, bring them down evenly all the way throughout so that it just gets a nice flat seal. Okay, so now we're going to replace the, this is the seal for the exhaust, where the exhaust and the intermediate housing meets the exhaust of the drive. So this is the old seal here. As you can see, just regular rubber seal, and it's actually got a little metal spring inside of it. So we've actually got both parts, the spring and the seal here. So we're going to go ahead and replace that and pop that in there. Alright guys, so that seal is in there. Just make sure that this spring is fully in that groove all the way around. So that's pushing up against it and keeping it in there. But this is all good. This is all nice. Looking good. Like I said, here's the old one with the old spring and stuff. So yeah, it was getting pretty corroded, getting pretty old. It's pretty hard, and that's how you know that you gotta replace these. Okay, so now what we're gonna do before we throw on the big ball gear and all that is we're going to put the water pump assembly back together on the bottom of this drive here. So once we get this guy in, and then the water pump attached to the bottom of it, capped off with this baby, then we'll be able to fit the ball gear in nicely. We can do it really either way, but it's easier having this in first, lining everything up correctly, making sure everything meshes, and then once we make sure everything meshes, the way we make sure everything meshes, we turn the ball gear and see if the bottom shaft moves. So if that ball gear is moving and it's moving that shaft below, we're a-okay. Okay, so we got this assembly onto the bottom of the upper gear case. Don't be afraid to give it a tap with a rubber mallet. It may need it. And now the water pump is going to come to the back of this here, and we're going to put some aviation Forme gasket on it. Now it calls out the OMC gasket, but it's literally the exact same stuff. So we're going to pop that on this side of the pump, all around here, fit this on, then throw our bolts through and tighten down with this end cap. It just pops right there. So yeah, that's what we're doing. So let's get this back on. Let's get this puppy nice and seated. Alright, so I've greased the shaft spline there. I've got the Forme gasket on the water pump, and now we're going to pop them in. Okay, so now we've got the water pump in. I just put these bolts in to make sure it got it, you know, in the correct place. We still have to put the pivot cap on here, but I wanted to make sure it's in the right place, because what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to just tap it with a mallet again, just as you had to on this one and on this assembly, just so it fits in that thing nice and snug. And that's why we had that gasket sealer in there and stuff. That's gonna seal that all up. So now let's take these bolts out. It's all in position the way we like it, and then we're gonna put some anti-seize on them, put the pivot cap on, re-put those bolts on, tighten them down. And then we can't forget, we have an O-ring that actually goes around this water pump here, sits up against there. So we gotta make sure we put that on before we put on our pivot cap. Alright, so the water pump and the pivot cap is on, all nicely secured back together. And now we will be putting on the last of stuff for the upper gear case housing, and that is this big old ball gear here. So we're gonna slide this baby right into the top here, mesh him up with that gear in there, and we should be just chilling. Now, one thing I need to mention, I mentioned it in the other videos taking it apart, is remember, one, what shims you have. If you order new ones and take these off and everything, make sure to know the order in which they were. Put them exactly the same, back to exactly the same way, etc., because the meshing of this gear and that gear is very important, and if it's off by just a little hair, it's going to screw things up. So make sure you put it exactly the same, set them in the same order, etc. Each color has a thickness to it, so if you do have to order new ones, you just look for the color, find the thicknesses that you need, and buy what you need from there. Okay guys, before we put the upper gear case onto the lower unit here, lower gear case unit here, we need to put the exhaust housing on. Okay, this is where it sits, where the upper gear case sits down, the cover comes onto, all that good stuff. So there is a few screws here, a few nuts and bolts. So one is through the rudder into this back tab here, and then we have a string of about 8 all the way around that then go into the side here. So we're going to get all those guys on, and then once that's on, we can pop it up and we can put the upper gear case housing on it. We will also need to bring this shift cable back through this hole, just like we did before, just opposite. You know, we're just going to grease it back up, pull it through, and then we'll pull it back through the upper gear housing. So we have all of this assembled. everything's tightened down. The cable has been brought through, so everything's good. So now we're going to move on to the rudder here, and what we have to do is replace the grommet that goes in there. It's a little rubber grommet, and that rubber grommet is for, it's kind of weird in the rudder, even the old one kind of sits a little weird, but this grommet is for this water intake tube right here, which goes from this rudder into swivel housing here. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. And before that, this is on the drive here, just like that. And that's how that sits. And then of course the lower gear case is right there. So there's a clamp on the swivel housing on the lower gear case, and that's for, there's 2 bolts for this clamp here for the water intake tube. So this goes on the water intake tube. I just did some dry fitting real quick. Everything fits up, fits in the grommet nicely, fits in the rudder, etc. So everything fits nicely. So we're going to slip this onto it, pop it into place, and then we're going to cinch this clamp down with these 2 screws here. Alright guys, so we tighten that clamp in there down, and that is all secured. And then we have the rudder plate on underneath right now, and all we have to do is pop this guy on. This guy, as you saw, we'll throw the grommet back in here. That'll connect up to the water intake tube. This will come through the lower gear case into this bolt here, and then there's a bolt for the rudder. Alright guys, we've got the rudder on, everything together, and so now what we can do is we can take this upper gear case housing, pop it onto the lower gear case housing, and then put our cover and stuff all back together. But I'm going to have to run and grab my stand for this, put this on the stand, and then finish up the rest of this. And so now we're going to put the upper gear case housing on. Now there's a nylon washer that you got to put between the swivel housing and the cap on the water pump here. Okay, and it'll even say in the book here, white nylon thrust washer with OMC triple guard grease. We don't have OMC triple guard, as you guys know. OMC is out of business, but trailer bearing grease is just the same stuff, has the same heat capacity, stuff like that. So trailer bearing grease is pretty much what you want to use with this stuff. You know, high heat, a lot of friction, etc. So that's what we're doing. We grease that up, place that in. Now this literally just, as you guys know from the previous videos, this literally just sits right on top of that, and then the cover comes and we screw that all down together. So let's put this baby on. Alright, so now we've got the upper gear case on, we've got our shift cable clip on, and now we got to put the cover on. We have this washer and spring assembly that goes on top of here. Cover then comes on, this screws through, and then our oil fill cap and check dipstick goes through that cover down into here. So let's do it. Okay, the drive is back together. It is, I've done all my checks. Lower gear house is spinning, the water pump spinning, upper gear house is spinning from the ball gear, the worm drive, or the worm gear. I spin it, it moves the drive, everything seems to be good, everything seems to be in place. Left to do on this, clean it up a bit from all my greasy marks and stuff like that, and then maybe a little touch-up paint from stuff I chipped, bumping stuff and everything like that. But besides that, this is ready to go on the boat, and we're going to see how I did pretty much on it. So, yeah.